Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. I want you all to know this is my first point of personal privilege in 4 years being here, so I don't take this lightly when I do it. I want to talk about the UNI funding issue, and before I start, I want to be clear that this is not about placing one of our Regents universities in higher esteem than the other. It is simply about fairness and equity of tax dollars. I've noticed something different about the student lobbyists this year. The UNI student lobby team has been relentless in their efforts to talk to many of us about the UNI funding issue. That's because there is a problem. The basic premise of public higher education is that Iowa citizens, taxpayers, assist and invest in Iowa students in order to develop a strong workforce for the future. Then shouldn't Iowa dollars follow Iowa students? Let me quote you, Mr. Speaker. The concern is that if UNI continues to accept the crumbs from the other two institutions, then that's what they will get into perpetuity. I, for one, as an alumni of UNI and a representative from Cedar Falls, do not want to accept the crumbs anymore. My colleagues, something needs to be done. Let me reiterate some of these facts. While UNI educates 23% of Iowa students attending one of our three public institutions, the university only receives 18% of the state funding. This means that the University of Iowa receives nearly $14,000 for every Iowa student attending, while UNI receives about $7,600. 90% of UNI's enrollment comes from within Iowa borders. Last year, 85% of UNI employed graduates stayed in Iowa, and 74% of UNI alumni are still in Iowa a decade after graduating. These are Iowa students being educated by an Iowa institution and staying in Iowa to work, raise their families, and serve our communities. UNI was more severely impacted by the budget cuts during the recession because of its greater reliance on state appropriations. State appropriations make up 53% of UNI's budget compared to 32% of our sister institutions. University of Iowa has over $500 million in cash. ISU has $134 million, while UNI has $27 million in cash. UNI depends on revenues from in-state tuition more than the other two state universities. Back-to-back in-state tuition freezes have hit UNI harder than the other universities. UNI doesn't have the out-of-state tuition or a law school or a medical hospital, but it does have a higher percentage of Iowans. Let's put an end to this university funding war that happens every year. As one of our former colleagues, former State Representative Willard Jenkins, opined recently, I believe that the funding split for the three universities needs to be rebalanced. It should reflect the proportion of Iowa resident students attending each university. Or maybe it should be as simple as the commonly accepted percentage of 40-40-20 percentage split going to Iowa, ISU, and UNI respectively being put in the code. If that percentage split was followed, UNI would not be looking at a potential cut right now. I call on the Board of Regents to make funding percentages reflect the proportion of Iowa resident students attending each university. If that does not happen in this coming year, I promise to offer legislation next year, God willing that I'm back in this body, to make that happen. This is the right thing to do for the Iowa taxpayer, for parents at all three universities, and for UNI students. I am UNI, and I do not want to continue accepting the crumbs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.